Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs. We're going to get into the salary cap. What can the Chiefs do? How much do they have? And how much could they get to today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs, your local Chiefs podcast, 5 days a week. We have you covered. We are going to be getting into the salary cap, how much the Chiefs possibly have, what they have right now, how much they can possibly create a little bit later, and what is most likely going to be at the very end of today's show. We are brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go check out another show, whether it's Locked On Royals, Locked On NFL, lots of different podcasts that you can check out that Locked On has you covered for your sports teams. There's a lot to talk about when you talk about the salary cap. The Chiefs are sitting at about $8 million right now in the when it comes to the salary cap. They are going to have to make some moves to get some things done. As I said, we are brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. Be sure to check out another show. We also have a text line that you can get a lot more information. Our locals or join us on the text line at 816-357-8781. Now, let's get down to what the Chiefs have in cap space, how much they can possibly make. And again, we will talk about what is likely to be done a little bit later in the show. But when we start talking about what they have right now, currently, the thought is they have about $8 million in cap space for 2025. We don't have a set figure exactly as to what the salary cap is going to be for 2025. We have a range. And right now it's looking like it's going to be around $275 million, $274.5 million, somewhere in there. Could be upwards of $280 million. I've seen different numbers from different places. But the Chiefs are looking like if they have $275 million, they have about $8 million in cap space. That sounds like a decent amount. The problem, only the top 51 players are counted against the salary cap at this point in the season. And currently the Chiefs are under, but they only have 50 people on their roster. When you go into training camp, you have a 90-man roster. You only need to have the top 51 accounted for in the salary cap, so that's not going to be that big of a problem. But they still have to sign 40 players, and they don't have enough salary cap to be able to carry enough players, because when you get into the season, you're going to have 53 players on the active roster, another 16 for the practice squad, and then however many players you put on injured reserve. They all have to fit under your salary cap for the current year. So when we look at this, it's almost $7.9 million, a little under $8 at this point. What are the big things that Kansas City can do? There are several different areas that they could possibly look at. Ryan and I have talked about these. It's all over Chiefs Twitter talking about what they can do on the salary cap. The biggest one is obviously going to be Patrick Mahomes. That's something that they're going to address this year. I don't know what they're going to do exactly. They're going to make it. They're going to get into free agency. They're going to have an answer on one of the questions that we'll talk about in the next segment a little bit deeper, which is Travis Kelce and what he's going to do. I do know that it came out that Brett Veach expects him to return. I'm going to play devil's advocate and go both directions and say, what it would be if he did return, what it would be if he didn't return, because he hasn't specifically stated he is going to be back in 2025. Brett Veach believes he will be, but he hasn't gotten that answer from Travis Kelce, and Travis hasn't said anything that I have seen to this point as I'm recording this right now. So with the Chiefs at $8 million in cap space, they're going to need $3 to $4 million probably to sign their draft class. So that puts them at about $4 million left. That is not going to be enough to sign all of the veteran players that you need to re-sign, all of the free agents, all the undrafted free agents, all of the restricted free agents that you want to try to bring back to this roster in 2025. They're simply going to have to make some moves. We've talked about the easiest one with Patrick Mahomes a little bit. I'll get into that here in the next segment a lot more. Another easy one to make an adjustment on is Chris Jones. We've seen that he is going to continue to play at a high level. At least he did this season. So he is worth what they're paying him right now. I don't think that would keep them from making any kind of move with him. So I wouldn't be shocked if they make a move with Chris Jones, maybe free up some cap space that way. But the real crux of the matter and what they have to figure out and what they have to answer in the next couple of weeks when you're getting into the free agency is, what do they do with Joe Thuney? Joe Thuney has a cap hit just shy of $27 million. With that one cap hit alone, it would free up just about $16 million in cap space if they cut him. I'm not saying that they should, but that's about what it would free up. $16 million gets you to close to, $24 million in salary cap space. That's plenty to sign your free agents. That's plenty to sign your draft class. It's plenty to sign out all the players for the season in just that $24 million. That's how close they could be to getting to where they need to be when it comes to the salary cap. Do I think that's the move they make? No, I think that they do something with Joe Thuney, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. But I do think that that is going to be the first domino to probably fall in the next couple of weeks. They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with Joe Thuney, because I don't think, unless he comes out and he wants to retire, if he wants to retire, they can't do anything. They're on the hook for $11 million this year, and $16 million would come off because that's a salary amount. So they could free up $16 million if he retires, but they'd still have $11 million cap hit if he retired. I don't see him retiring. He is still playing at an extremely high level. He was voted the team MVP for the 2024 season. So I do think that he probably still wants to continue playing. The question is what is he willing to play for? That's going to be the big question. The going market for guards right now is about $21 million. I believe Landon Dickerson signed a deal for that last year, the year before that. That's the high market on the guards right now. And that actually becomes an even bigger issue because you have another guard that is a free agent going into this season. They're not franchise tagging Trey Smith. They're going to let him hit free agency, or they're going to try to sign him before free agency happens. So we'll see if that gets done, but that's another person that they would need to free up cap space for. Now, $21 million a year doesn't necessarily mean that that's what his cap number is going to be in 2025. I could talk about that a little bit later as well. But we do need to get into how much can the Chiefs actually create by making 4, 5, 6, 7 moves in the coming weeks. That's going to be next on Locked On Chiefs. So before the break, we were talking about how the Chiefs have about $8 million in cap space. What can they actually get to? This gets a little bit more of a complex situation, but I'm going to take a couple and we're going to go max. What can they get to this offseason? What do I think that they could possibly get to this offseason max-wise? The first one, and this is something, and I said this before, I understand that people are saying that he's going to be back, and it's possible that he will be. But I'm going to say that Travis Kelce is not back in 2024 or 2025. I apologize. That takes the Chiefs from $8 million to $25.2 million in cap space. If that happens, they automatically have enough money to do whatever they want to do in free agency, sign all their guys, get their free agent class done, get their draft picks done, and that takes care of pretty much everything that they would need to do. I do think that Travis Kelce is going to retire, but again, we're talking about what is the max Kansas City could do if they really wanted to. So that point, Travis Kelce is retired. He counts $2.5 million, a little bit over $2.5 million against the cap in 2025, and he frees up $17.25 million, gets them to 25.2. In this same scenario, Kansas City either cuts or Joe Thuney retires. One of those two things in this scenario of how do they get the max amount of cap space that they could possibly get. Now, the bigger problem that you get with this is we start getting into a situation where now you've lost two guys that have been all-pro players in the past couple of years at some point, and you have to replace them. But your salary cap is now at $41.2 million almost. That gives you the ability to go out and be big spenders in free agency if you want, or gives you the ability to re-sign a guy like Trey Smith if you want, or maybe even Trey Smith and Nick Bolton. There are lots of different directions that you can go if you were to do something like that and cut Joe Thuney, or Joe Thuney and Travis Kelce both retire, which in theory is possible for both of them. I'm not saying that I think that either will happen, but again, what is the max that Kansas City can create? This is where it gets a lot trickier because that's with two moves. Now you're at $41.2 million in cap space without having to make any other moves. and you could sign guys and you can re-sign guys and you can make some trades if you need to try to improve your roster. The reality, though, is that the one that is sitting here that makes the most sense and the one that Kansas City is most likely to do is to renegotiate or to change to move around Patrick Mahomes' non-prorated bonus and maybe even some of his base salary if they wanted to. He's got a base salary of 16.6. They can renegotiate or they can basically change the contract if they want to and lower his base salary and spread it out and make it part of a bonus. Or they can take his non-prorated bonus and they can prorate it. It depends on what they want to do. They have the ability to free up between Patrick Mahomes. It looks like his number is about $49 million in just his non-prorated bonus and his base salary. If they spread that out over a 5-year period, that means that they could free up $40 million by doing a proration and prorating his bonus, giving him a roster bonus for the rest of it, for most of his salary, and the rest of the non-prorated bonus. They could free up close to $40 million. That would take you to $81 million in salary cap space. Here's the problem with that. Can you do that? Yes. Is it smart to do that? Not really. One, you're getting rid of Joe Thuney, which we already talked about. All-pro player. Don't want to get rid of him. He's still probably a top 3 guard in the NFL. Travis Kelce retiring, you don't really have much control over that if he retires. Same with Thuney. If he retires, you don't have control over either of those. But the bigger problem is with Patrick Mahomes, you're going to have to pay him at some point. Do you want to free up salary cap space with Mahomes? Yes. Do you want to make it prohibitive in the future? Not really. Because right now, at this point, he's got $16 million in non-prorated bonus on his salary cap in 2025. If you do this, that number stays, so they can't do anything with that $16 million, but they could prorate and get rid of $40 million, which would go forward in the contract, and you have another $10 million that you're adding to the proration in 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029. They have the ability to do it because his contract's long enough, so you can make the move. It's not something that I expect them to do. I do expect them to use his contract. I don't know how much they're going to do. It's going to depend on what they do with Travis Kelce, what Travis Kelce decides, and what they're able to do with Joe Thuney. If they get a deal done with Thuney, they can make it to where they don't have to do anything with Patrick until I think they changed the contract when they renegotiated about a year ago. And it's now due a little bit later in the offseason or a little bit later in the new league year. So it gives them more flexibility to come in and say, okay, this is what we're going to be able to get done in free agency. This is the money we need. And they can make the move then, as opposed to it being like the first or second day of the league year. I think it's closer to the 5th or maybe even later in the new league year. So it gives them time to make some free agency deals at the beginning and still get this deal done and renegotiate and change his roster amount for 2025. The other guy that we've talked about, that I kind of talked about earlier, and the one that they could make a move with, is Chris Jones. He's got a salary cap number in 2025 of almost $35 million. And I don't think he plays on that in 2025. I think that it's going to be something where they're going to take some of the money on his roster bonus, which is $15.1 million. And they're probably going, and he's got a $13.75 million salary, and they're going to move some of that around. Is it going to be a ton? Maybe not. But if they were willing to take 5 or 6 million and get it off, take 5 or 6 million off the 35, they could probably get 2 or 3 of their own free agents that they have between restricted free agents and some of their guys, maybe like a Derek Nottie, or I don't think Tershawn Wharton's going to be a guy that they can bring back, but a Derek Nottie is somebody that maybe you can bring back for a couple $1 million on a veteran minimum type deal where it doesn't cost much in the salary cap, and Chris Jones can pay for it. So that's maybe something that they consider doing, and that gives them the ability to bring somebody back that they know fits their system, and it's not a large cost. Kind of the same thing you could do with Mike Pennell. Again, I don't think Tershawn Wharton is going to be a guy that they're going to be able to afford. I think he's probably priced himself out of Kansas City unless he doesn't find he's in a good market, and then maybe he can sign a deal similar to what Mike Dana got. It's going to be probably a little bit more, I would think, based on what Tershawn Wharton did this year. And Dana got $8 million a year, so I would expect that Wharton's going to get more than that. But Dana came back here because he didn't get the deal he wanted in free agency, and they're able to afford him. He's a player that fits a role in Kansas City, and it works for them. So that's something to watch. The other guy that you can consider doing something to on his contract, although I don't think that they will do it, is Jawan Taylor. They can't cut Taylor. He's got a $20 million guaranteed salary in the 2025, so they can't do anything there. The only thing they could really do is trade him. I don't think that that's going to happen. Maybe they move him to left tackle. Maybe that's what their thought process is for this year, is that they're going to move him to left tackle, and they're going to see if he can take that and his salary cap number of almost 27 or a little over 27 million in 2025 becomes a lot more tenable if he's your left tackle. So maybe that's the direction they go. But they do have money that they could free up. He's got a base salary of 19.5. It's guaranteed. If they wanted to prorate it, they could prorate it on the last year of his contract as well, and they could free up some space there. I don't think that they go that direction. Essentially, though, with Chris Jones, with Patrick Mahomes, with Travis Kelce, with Joe Thuney, you can free up 80, 90, maybe even close to $100 million in salary cap space. Is it worth it to do in 2025? I'm torn on that because the first thing I talked about was cutting Travis Kelce to get there. If you cut Travis Kelce, why are you trying to bring back all these other players? Why are you trying to get all this salary cap space? And what is it you're trying to push for? Because if you don't have Kelce anymore, you have to start rebuilding the roster, because they have built the roster and they built the offense to go around the tight end. They don't have somebody on the roster that can take Travis Kelce's spot right now. Noah Gray is a good tight end, but he's not Travis Kelce. Nobody on this roster is, and probably they can't get somebody in the draft that can replace him. But if you're going to replace him this year, then there's no reason to free up almost $100 million in cap space. So I don't think that that's the direction they go. What do they do, and how does it look in 2025 is coming up next. So we talked about where they are. We've talked about what they could get to, because they could get to 90 to $100 million if they wanted to, and if a couple of things go their way. Where do they actually end up? What is the most likely scenario? What is the thought process, and how do they really go about it for 2025 in building this roster, trying to compete and trying to win another Super Bowl in 2025? Right now, as it sits, Brett Veach believes Travis Kelce is going to be back. So I'm going to go with the thought process that Travis Kelce is back in Kansas City in 2025. I'm also going to assume that Joe Thuney is back in Kansas City in 2025, because I don't think that he wants to retire. I think he wants to continue playing. Kansas City obviously finds him to be one of the key pieces of their roster. They voted him team MVP. To me, I think he's back in 2025. I don't think there's any chance he's back at the salary cap number he has. He's going to have to do an extension of some sort. And there's always the possibility that Kansas City looks at it and says, okay, well, if you don't want to play several more years, maybe we just add void years. I don't think that they want to go that direction, because to me, the big question and what we have to figure out is, if Travis Kelce is playing this year, is he going to play any past this? Because I talked about this in the last segment, and it really plays into how they're going to build this roster going forward. If they get Travis Kelce back, I think they have to feel like they have to force themselves to go all in and try to do whatever they can to get to the Super Bowl, because maybe it's Kelce's last year before they have to make some serious changes to the way they build the roster and how they run their offense. If that's the case, then you do what you can, and maybe you do add void years to Thuney's contract. And it is a situation where you add 2 or 3 void years, his 27 million number becomes closer to 10 or 11 or 12. And depending on how many years you add, and at that point you get to close to $20 million in salary cap space before you even touch the one that's going to get changed. I don't know what they're going to do with Patrick Mahomes. I don't know how much they're going to take. I don't know what their thought process is and how they're going to build this roster around him. But the biggest key, and Ryan and I have talked about this a ton over the last week, and even probably since really right after the Super Bowl, the biggest key is Kansas City has to fix the left tackle position. If it's not something that they could fix in 2025 with a, somebody that they're going to sign as on a long-term deal, they're going to have to try to draft somebody. Then you do it the best you can, but you have to go sign somebody in free agency. So to me, that's how this builds out. Is you have to figure out who you can get in free agency, and that's where you determine what you're going to do with Patrick Mahomes' deal. His salary cap number alone is $66.25 million, almost $66.26 million. He can free up $40 million easy. Do they use that? No. Are they going to use 20 of it? That wouldn't surprise me. If Travis Kelce is playing, then you're still around $8 million in salary cap space. You do something with Joe Thuney, you can maybe easily get to 15. Maybe you can get to even more. The big question is what are you going to do with your own free agents? There's rumors going around right now that they're going to do whatever they can to try to keep Trey Smith. That could cost them $21 million. The key, though, is if you go back and look at Landon Dickerson's contract, it was $21 million. But Creed Humphrey signed a contract extension last year with Kansas City. His cap number for the entire 2024 season was only $5.1 million because he got a bonus of 18.3 and he had a salary of 1.125. Smith's isn't going to be much different when it comes to salary. It may be a little bit higher because it usually goes up year to year, so it's probably going to be a little bit higher what the base minimum is. But what is going to be their salary cap proration? What is the bonus amount that they're going to pay Trey Smith if they get him to sign a deal? Because if you're looking at 1.2, 1.3 million is your base salary, and the only other thing that you're going to have is that salary is the bonus, the prorated signing bonus. Maybe you keep his number around $6, $7, $8 million because you're giving him a big bonus. He's getting a big amount of cash in 2025, but he's not actually costing you a ton in 2025 against the salary cap because it is all bonus. It is all spread across the length of the contract, whether that's 4 or 5 years, depending. Creed Humphrey did sign a 4-year contract extension because he was actually under contract for 2024 when he signed his extension. So where do they go? What do they do? With Patrick Mahomes, the answer is they're going to make an adjustment. On average, they've done probably $15 to $20 million from Patrick's contract on a yearly basis. That would get them down, if they're able to take $20 million off, that would get them down to being about a $45 million hit on the cap in 2025. That's easily doable with his contract. That's easily doable in keeping that amount of money on the salary cap. That would get them to about $28 million before you talk about their draft class, before you talk about Trey Smith, before you talk about Joe Thuney getting an extension. The thought process with Joe Thuney becomes, can you get him to sign a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal and extension? Can you give him, $10, $15 million a year on average for the next, 2 or 3 years and extend out some of his money and drop his number to get it to where it's maybe, instead of 27 or 26 this year, it's closer to, 17, 18, maybe 19 million, because they have a $10 million or $11 million bonus that they can't get rid of from previous contracts. So when you're looking at all of this playing in, it's a question of, okay, what does Travis Kelce do? I still think he does play. I think that Brett Veach probably has a pretty decent idea of what direction he's probably leaning. That said, it's also possible that he doesn't and that Travis retires. If that happens, it's $17.25 million on the cap for the Chiefs in 2025. Hope it doesn't happen because I would love to see Travis Kelce back in a Chiefs uniform in 2025. I think there's still more that he can do in a Chiefs uniform, and he can still be productive and help this team. Joe Thuney, I think that they're going to have to extend him. I think they have to work on a 2 or 3 year deal. They have to figure out what he wants to do because right now Joe Thuney is sitting there with a salary cap number of just about $27 million, and he's 33 years old. Do you keep him for the next 2 or 3 years? Do you give him a 2-year extension, which would basically put him under contract through 2027 and move some of that money around and maybe get it to where his number drops to 17, 18 million? You could probably do that. But it's the question of what he wants as a contract. Being a top 3 guard, it's going to be really hard to say, we want to pay you less than what we're wanting to try to pay Trey Smith, who they're getting ready to try to also pay. So it's going to be a complicated situation, and it's really complicated math. When it comes to Trey Smith, the reality is he's probably paid his way out of Kansas City. If he wants to be in Kansas City, he can get it done. He can make it happen with Brett Veach. He can make it to where it fits in their salary cap, and he can be back in Kansas City if he wants to be here. And to be clear, I don't blame him if he wants to go get paid. He's earned that. He's played well. He has earned a big contract. By all means, go get your contract if that's what you want. But you're not going to be able to get that contract in Kansas City, I don't believe. That's not generally the way the Chiefs have done things. Travis Kelce has taken less money. Patrick Mahomes took less money than he could have. I know his contract seems outlandish, but he took way less money than I think he could have gotten if he would have taken a 5-year deal and been a free agent. Obviously, he wasn't a free agent, and they got him because of that. They got him to do the 10-year deal because of that, and he wants to win, he wants to play, and he wants to have a winning team around him. So he's going to try to help the Chiefs as much as he can when it comes to the salary cap and recruiting. The question is what can you do with Trey Smith? What can you do with a guy like Nick Bolton? You can't pay Nick Bolton $15-16 million a year. You just can't. That's not something that this roster is going to be able to afford. And the other guys that I haven't even mentioned that also play into this roster math is, what do you do with a guy like Trent McDuffie? What do you do with a guy like George Karlaftis? George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie each have a cap hit. Trent McDuffie is 2.6 in 2025, and George Karlaftis is 2.3 in 2025. Both of those are in their third year, so they can get extension, or have finished their third year, so they can get extensions now. Trent McDuffie has a salary cap of 2.6. Obviously, they would have to decide to pick up his 5th-year option, which would be coming up this May. So that's something that they have to decide whether or not they're going to do. I would imagine they're going to do that. George Karlaftis is in the same boat. They're both first-round picks. So you would have to look at that. I would expect that both of those are going to get done. But the reason I bring those two up is they signed Creed Humphrey after 3 years. They didn't give him a chance to hit free agency. They signed him after 3 years. If this roster and this team wants to keep players, they're going to try to sign them after their first 3 years and get them as possibly as cheap as they can. So if they're going to get something done with Trey McDuffie and George Karlaftis, I expect it to get done this offseason. It may not happen right away. It may be something that happens in the summer, but it'll be interesting to watch. That is going to be it for us today. Let me know if you have any salary cap questions on Locked On Chiefs. Lots more to talk about when we get into more offseason talk. What can they do? What can they build? How do they do free agency going forward? That's all coming when Ryan and I get back. Thank you for listening today, and we will talk to you tomorrow.